Welcome to the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Lipsky of Break of Day Capital. I talk to leading experts to discuss a wide range of subjects to educate investors on best-in-class practices to build legacy wealth and positively impact communities. Let's jump in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Lipsky with Break of Day Capital. Be sure to join our Facebook group, Asset Management Mastery, where we have a great community of thousands of like-minded individuals sharing resources and best practices. Hey everyone, we have launched the BODC Multifamily Impact Fund. Invest with a trusted operator with a track record of success. Our fund offers diversification, risk mitigation, tax benefits, and stringent acquisition criteria. If you'd like to learn more, head over to our website at breakofdaycapital.com.
Choosing the right insurance coverage for multifamily properties isn't that complicated if you know who to talk to. At the Garzella Group, we're uniquely qualified to help you navigate the range of policy choices you have, and we're committed to saving you 30% in the process. We do intensive market research and have nationwide relationships, so we can find coverage other insurance brokers simply can't. We should talk. Go to quotenow.biz and we'll start the conversation.
Today on the podcast, we have Kevin Bupp. Kevin is a seasoned commercial real estate investor, a top podcast host, and author of The Cash Flow Investor. Kevin focuses on mobile home parks and parking lots and has over 20 years of real estate experience. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. Can you start by telling the listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure, Gary, and thanks for having me here. Excited to be here. Kevin Bupp, the CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors. We're a boutique real estate private equity firm that specializes in two verticals: manufactured housing communities and parking. So think parking lots, parking garages. However, my story spans much longer than that. I always joke and say I've never had a real job. So I got introduced to real estate at 19 and also bought my first property at the age of 20. And it's been real estate ever since, with a few other, I guess not related businesses along the way, but real estate's made up 99.9% of my adult career. And so just having a lot of fun doing it. And, today we've got a pretty large team, very different than what it looked like years back. Got about $350 million of assets under management. We own and operate manufactured housing communities in, I believe it's 14 different states now, and parking facilities in 4 different states at present time. So that's the quick and easy.
Nice. Yeah, I wish I got in much younger. And I think most real estate investors would say the same thing. They wish they got in, at a much younger age, and it allowed you to kind of build a wealth of knowledge, go through, economic cycles, which is so huge, because I think that's one of the things where people really screw up, and they think it's always going to go up, which over time it does, but certainly they've taken hits along the way in 2008 and more recently, although it wasn't a big financial crisis, but because of interest rates. But curious, how did you find mobile home parks?
Yeah, definitely by accident. It's just the same way how this journey all started, all kind of by accident. But I lived through '08. Lost a lot of my real estate during that period of time. I was down here in Southwest Florida. Just like California, one of the ground zero areas. Just everything was upside down. Unemployment was all time high, and rental rates decreased significantly over the first couple of years. It was just it was kind of a bloodbath, and then there was a excess of supply that exists in the marketplace. So long story short, had quite a significant battle from '08 to roughly 2011, kind of managing just chaos and damage control more than anything, trying to find my way through the other side. And so I wasn't active at all of buying '08 to 2011. I was just managing what I had and dealing with the day-by-day chaos. And so when it came time to kind of get a breath of fresh air and figure out what phase 2 looked like of the real estate journey, kind of rebuild it all, I went on an exploratory journey, Gary. Everything had changed. Landscape had changed from, pre '08 to, post '08. World was different. Lending was different. Everything was different. And I just had stepped away just because I was trying to deal with everything that was going on at home and in the business. And so as I went on this exploratory journey, I was introduced to a gentleman, had been a commercial banker for many years. I was all about meeting new people, trying to find out what's the new way, just trying to expand my network. And I met a guy by the name of Randy, and Randy had been a commercial banker for 30 plus years, retired, and ultimately bought a number of mobile home parks as his retirement. And the reason why he did is the last 10 years of his banking career, he had a number of clients that he that owned and operated mobile home parks. So he saw that side of the business, understood it, saw the profitability, and it was very intrigued and basically committed to making that part of his retirement plan. And so I met with Randy for lunch, and literally I just, with no intention, no agenda, didn't even know they owned mobile home parks when I first met with him, and that became our 2-hour topic of conversation during our lunch together, and that sparked a major light bulb moment in me of, well, I think this is it. I'd never considered a mobile home park, but heck, Randy's got me excited. I think I'm gonna go buy one of these things and see if it's all it's cut out to be. And so that was back in 2011. Bought the first mobile home park in 2012, and now we own about 3,500 lots in our portfolio. We've gone full cycle on, I think, just over 20 deals. So we've been at it over a decade now, and so it's been a fun ride.
Nice. And so I'm curious, what were you investing in before mobile home parks? And maybe what were some of the big takeaways, lessons learned from the 2008 crisis?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I started with, like a lot of folks, with single family stuff, and that's kind of what my first mentor, it's what he did. He had a small portfolio, roughly 30 single family / small multifamily properties. And I'm not a big fan of reinventing wheels if someone's got a business plan that works, right, and it's proven. And so that's how I started. And I ended up in my early 20s, ended up accumulating a pretty decent sized portfolio, about 120 single family homes. And then along the way, bought some random, mostly as a passive investor, some multifamily stuff. Had a few hundred multifamily doors along the way, and then some other various commercial types of property before '08 happened. As far as like lessons learned, I recall how difficult it was to acquire one by one 120 plus single family homes. It was, and then the chaos around managing it. There's a lot of technology today that exists that didn't exist back then, as far as sales and leasing and showing homes and marketing homes. Back then, it was all literally, putting signs in the ground, showing up with the mechanical lockbox, having leasing agents drive around, maintenance repair guys drive around, and we own these things in like 5 different counties. And so the operations were incredibly inefficient with that many single family homes. And so I quickly identified that the multifamily stuff was way more efficient, at least as the property management was concerned. And so I'm not sure if that was a mistake or not. What happened in Florida was it wasn't unique, because what ultimately happened in '08 was you had a lot of markets like Phoenix, you had Las Vegas, you had a number of markets in California, Florida had Orlando, Tampa, Miami. You just had, capital was so easy and cheap, and builders were building rooftops for populations that weren't even coming there yet, right? Like, it was just an excess amount of supply, and that's what really kicked our butts. That was a big part of it. Just too many homes, too many rooftops, values plummeted. And then on top of that, a lot of the employment was driven by construction, and that dried up. And so you had, now unemployment rates are all-time high. People didn't have work. People had bad credit. And there was a lot of homes that were sitting on the market that were available for rent and or for sale. And so that just absolutely made our, made the income that we were making on our portfolio, the cash flow, it dried up fairly quickly into towards negative cash flow. We had to give concessions. We would, units that would take maybe 5 days to turn or find a tenant for, now took months and months to find quality tenants for. So I'm not sure that we did anything wrong per se. I would say that the one thing that, if I had to reflect back, what we typically would do with our debt is we would go use private money to buy, 4 or 5 homes. And then we would go get a commercial loan, cross collateralize 5 homes. Normally these are 5-year loans. They're full recourse loans. And the challenge, multiple challenges there. Number one, 5-year loans. I had a couple that were, within a year or two of coming up, the debt maturities. I had a number of loans that were like that. And so banks sure as hell didn't want to talk when we were in the heat of it about, putting a new debt in place. On top of that, we had, going into default. But really what the biggest challenge that we faced was when all this started going down, it happened so quickly. Like, the roof crumbled so fast. And no banks were prepared for this. The lenders weren't prepared for this. They didn't have, loss mitigation departments or workout departments or loan modification teams. They didn't have any of the infrastructure in place. And so the banks that we had worked with that had a lot of our loans, they're just like, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. not really willing to modify this thing at this point in time. And we couldn't hang on that long. We hung on for like about 7 or 8 months. And then it became, trying to feed this beast $30,000-$40,000 a month to keep it afloat. And the values ultimately were upside down, literally in a very quick period of time. And so I would say, biggest lessons is efficiency of management. And again, I don't think that would necessarily have saved things back then. But as far as comparing, single family to that of multifamily, just the efficiency of management. But also, if you got a unit that goes empty in a multifamily property or a mobile home park, you're not 100% vacant, right? And so I think there's some lessons to be learned there as well. But outside of that, I think guys that were way smarter than I had equal amount of challenges back then. I will say that the one thing that we've done today to restructure our business that really has allowed us to thrive the last 2 years when others have been on the sidelines is we've been incredibly conservative with debt. And while that might not produce the highest returns for our investors, we never did any floating rate debt. And our leverage points are fairly low, 60, 65%, when we could have maybe got 70, 75, 80% on properties a couple years back. We didn't do that. And so we would typically put quite a bit more equity into deals, which doesn't, create the highest yields. But guess what? What's really happened over the last 2 years is we've slept incredibly well at night. Our portfolio has continued to perform, even if it's in a market where maybe our projections have slowed down as far as rent increases and all that. It hasn't made a lick of difference. Our debt coverage ratios are still incredibly solid. We're in a really good position, and there's no risk of default by any means. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson is just, having not necessarily just capital available, but really understanding your debt structure and kind of planning for the worst, right? No one knew when rates were going to go up. But I think if we all look back now, we'd be like, they only had one way to go. At some point, they had to go up. We just think they'd go up that fast, right? It's just trying to plan for the unknown. And I'm not going to say that I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I didn't want to go through '08 again, right? And so I just was overly conservative. And we probably had a lot of investors that over the years, we had a ton that have invested with us, but we probably had some that didn't because we weren't able to produce the same type of maybe returns that were being projected by some of our competitors. But guess what? Some of those competitors might not be producing those returns today, where ours has been steady Eddie. We've never missed a quarterly distribution now in 29 different quarters. And so anyway, just lots of lessons learned from the '08 crash and how to maybe do it better the second time around and create a house with a better foundation is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah, you're one of the few people that probably slept well in the real estate over the last few years because, I mean, even some of the really good operators have had, big capital calls or having to give back their property or whatnot. The seduction of so much leverage and the floating rate debt has sunk a lot of people. And I've certainly got on my soapbox many times and saying, stop chasing IRR, stop chasing the biggest bonus appreciation because anyone can make any deal look good. It's like the seasoned operators, the ones that have been through the great financial crisis. Those are the people that LPs should be looking to invest with because you're battle tested. You know how to minimize risk, and a lot of the others that are promising these 24% IRRs or higher, or even 20%, and I'm like, I'd rather under promise and over deliver because
that's right.
Things go wrong. It's like a business, like anything. You can never, like you said, you can't predict what's going to happen, but there are things that happen, and so rather be safe than sorry, and give you at the end of the day, give you a much higher number than a number that I overpromised,
That's right. I mean, probably the biggest dichotomy we had internally within our organization. There's one other principal, Brian Spear. If he had to bifurcate the company down the middle and see where we sit within the organization, he's more on the capital raising and the finance side. So he runs our entire finance team, as well as the capital raising side. And then I'm more on the acquisitions, and then I oversee the operations department. We're vertically integrated on the property management side. And so the biggest dichotomy we had in probably 2020, 2021, 2022, before rates started going up, was like we had so much capital that wanted to come in and find a home, but I had a very difficult time. We didn't buy a lot during those years. In fact, we sold a number of our properties, kind of pruned out our portfolio, picked the ones that we just didn't see maybe, a 10-year future in, and someone was maybe offering us a price that we never felt we would ever be able to obtain, right? And it's like, I don't know how they're making the underwriting work, but if you pay this price, I'll sell it to you. It's like the Godfather offer. And so we sold more than we bought in those years. But really the dichotomy, it was Brian saying, "Hey, Kevin, I'm turning capital away from our investors. Like literally it's going to go somewhere else if it doesn't come here." And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you because I can't make deals underwrite. Like we bought deals during those years, but we didn't buy a lot. I got outbid more times than I can count on things. And we're a qualified buyer. We've got a good track record, but seemingly there was always someone willing to pay more, willing to stretch a little bit more, willing to take a little bit more risk than what we were. But again, that put us in a really good position now in the last 2 years where all those other folks are kind of on the sidelines, dealing with the stuff they bought. And we were ready and willing, right, to get out there and take advantage of some opportunities that came to the marketplace. So again, I'm not going to act as though I knew exactly what was going to play out like that, but I feel really good now kind of looking back.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to stay true to your criteria, and most of the best deals that you do are the ones that you actually end up not doing, to protect your investors.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just all about being disciplined, right? I mean, the fundamentals at the end of the day don't change, and you have to do your best to try to plan for the worst. No one ever knows what that worst is going to look like. And again, none of us knew that rates would creep up that fast. And so I think that just caught a lot of people off guard. And but again, just knowing that we went into it, knowing that I was never ever comfortable with. There's enough to deal with managing properties, generally speaking, kind of managing the business plan, to have to actually manage the debt side as well. You got variable rate debt. You better have your finger on the pulse on the market and literally be 3 steps ahead of whatever is going to come down the pike, right? Like you just got to be able to plan for the unknown, and that's very difficult to do. Even large institutional players have a difficult time doing that. They've got a lot of money and a lot of resources to throw at it. So, and most of us small groups, we're not the institution. We don't have folks, a ton of MBAs on our payroll that can help us manage that risk and be a couple steps ahead. And so anyway, just I think the safer play is the way that we've played it, and again, it's proven to be successful.
So let's talk about parking lots. I've never had anyone on the podcast talk about parking lots. I know it's a great business. What got you into it, and talk about some of the economics of it.
Yeah, I was saying if I had $1 for every time somebody would say that, for me being the guest on the podcast, the first time I've had someone about parking, and I kind of said the same thing. I got turned on to it. I forget the time frame. 6-7 years ago. I have a real estate podcast myself, and I like to interview some niche stuff every once in a while. Like I did a whole series on car wash investments way before car washes are what they are today. Laundromats, bowling alleys, all kinds of random weird commercial investments. One of them was parking. Met a guy, and he was in the parking world, owned parking. He was also a broker that brokered parking across the country. And again, we've all parked in a parking lot. We've all paid to park somewhere. Some of us maybe do it on a daily basis. Somebody owns that parking investment. It could be a municipality. A lot of them are owned by cities and local governments, but the others are owned by private companies. Some large, some small. And I was intrigued by the interview that I had with him, and was intrigued enough to where I couldn't stop thinking about it. And ultimately, we took a couple of years of digging deeper into the asset class, trying to understand it, going to conferences, meeting operators within the industry, and just identified that it was a very fragmented niche, very, very much like mobile home parks were when we got into it a decade plus ago. Now mobile home parks are well known, lots of operators in the space, but 12, 13 years ago, that was not the case. It was very much a mom and pop industry with only a few large institutional groups in the space, but 95% of assets really held by either a municipality or a mom and pop operator. Parking is very similar to that, and so that was the first thing that attracted me, just the fragmented nature of it. There weren't what we have found there weren't a lot of institutional owners in the space outside of like a New York City or a Chicago or a Boston, any of the other like secondary size markets. It was very fragmented with ownership. So that was the first thing that attracted us. But then second to that is the location of the lot of park. Like we're pretty specific on what we want to buy and where we want to buy it, but the locations that we own, and we look at it as irreplaceable real estate. It's in high density areas. It's cash flowing covered land play to where at the present time, parking is the lowest valued use, but we buy these knowing that it makes economic sense on the parking income as it sits today. But whenever the time comes, whenever cars are flying or whatever else is going to happen with this autonomous vehicle world, whether it's 10 years, 15 years, whatever it might be, we know that when that time comes, that piece of real estate, the piece of land that sits on has a much higher, better use even as something else, as a future redevelopment. So for us, it's make a bunch of money now, make a bunch of cash flow, but sit on this valuable, incredibly valuable piece of land for as many years as we have to, until the time comes where we're, ready to redevelop it and kind of see that additional span of profit. We don't underwrite that piece of it because we surely can't. We don't know what the future holds. However, we do know that the underlying land value without the parking on it, is a very high dollar amount, and we know that we have vertical rights. So all these things that we take in consideration, and know that a plan B or a future plan of redevelopment is definitely in store. So I'm more than happy to go deeper into parking and the economics of it and kind of, what we look for in a parking asset, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, and well, I'll ask you a few more questions about it, but is it typically more of a longer term hold than like whereas a mobile home park or even a multifamily, you're typically 3 to 5 year hold time where, if you're looking for redevelopment, maybe it's a 10 or you just do infinite returns.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're a little different of an operator, both in the manufactured housing and the parking space, in that, both of these asset classes, they're literally the only asset class that has diminishing supply. So there's really no new standalone parking being built in major cities. In fact, a lot of it's being redeveloped over time. In addition to that, with parking, pretty much every major city across the country has removed the parking lot or parking minimum requirements from new development. So historically, what would happen is if you're a developer, you're going to go build a high-rise multifamily condo, whatever it might be, mixed-use building, you would have to put in X amount of parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. They had some type of formula like that where no matter whether your plans called for it or not, if you're a developer saying, I don't need that much parking, and the city's going to say, well, sorry, you need, based on this formula, you need this much parking. And what happened is over years, you'd had excess parking supply in some cities. And so a lot of that's gone by the way, the dodo. So a lot of cities removed that. So now developers are building what they want, and they make more money by building another condo unit than they do another parking space. And so for that reason, there's a diminishing supply of parking in all the major cities across the country. And so they're not making more of it, and it's basically going away. And so for us, we know that there's a massive barrier to entry, and we know that, again, if we buy the right parking garage or lot in the right location, it should yield high demand for many, many, many years to come. Mobile home parks kind of similar. They're not building them anymore. It's got a diminishing supply. And so while we've gone full cycle in a lot of deals, what we've learned over the years is that one of the most difficult things is not necessarily turning around a deal or extracting value out of it. It's whenever we sell something that's a well-known entity, is actually finding another one that that you're going to step into, because you've always got to, if you're going to continue growing your business and you're selling assets, you got to continually buy as well. And with the supply demand imbalance that exists in mobile home parks, more demand coming in every day, every year into the space, but no new supply, right? We found ourselves kind of running up a time clock. And so now we've really shifted more to a buy and hold long-term model. And we've honed in with the investor base that is best suited for that. Like, we're not necessarily looking for the guys that are looking to hit home runs every time and recycle their capital every 3 to 5 years. That's just not a good fit for us. I don't think it's best suited for a sustainable long-term business either, because you're essentially working yourself out of business, at least in the two asset classes that we're in. So for that reason, we look at pretty much everything as though we're going to hold it for 10 plus years. Not saying that we will, right, but that we'll hold it for 10 plus years. Yeah,
more gardening versus hunting. And yeah, like you said, the longer you're in this business, then you start to do longer and longer holds, because it's hard to find those good assets and get them into shape. And
that's right. I mean, some of the biggest regrets I have is some of the assets we've sold. There's been a couple that I'm just kind of kick myself. And don't get me wrong, we had big paydays when we've sold those, and a lot of that has really contributed to us growing the business and making some very strategic hires when that happens. And so we might not be where we're at today if we wouldn't have sold some assets, but it's still painful to think of some of the assets that we sold. Time really, time can serve you quite well in holding real estate, right? If it's a great location, it's a great asset, and you're running it appropriately, then it should only appreciate over time. And so there's one we sold right near Raleigh, North Carolina. Again, pains me that we sold it. We shouldn't have. Our basis was so low. We had done 2 different cash out refinances, had made a ton of money over the years that we owned it, and ultimately had a big pop at the end. But gosh, we could have just kept doing cash out refinances and, taking that tax-free money and just held it forever. So not sure why we didn't, but again, it was a good payday, but still very regretful that we made that decision. I think it's just short-sighted more than anything. You know, you gotta force yourself to think longer term. It's really difficult to say no to dollar bills, like if they're right in your face of like, hey, I could pay you this today. You know, you willing to walk away? You got think long and hard about that. Just don't get caught up in the moment.
And I mean, it's good. Like you said, it's good to build your team, and also for investors too, because that really helps to grow your investor base. They feel confident, then they'll come back. So it's definitely a need in the beginning. It really helps your business. But I appreciate you coming on, sharing your expertise on parking lots and mobile home parks. Kevin, where can listeners find out more about you and your company?
Yeah, you can go visit us at investwithsunrise.com. Got quite a bit of information on our website, some case studies, current offerings, and what have you. You can also listen to my podcast there. We have all the most recent episodes up there. And then, you know, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, fairly active on Facebook and Instagram as well. And my last name's unique enough where if you just type it in, Bupp, Bupp, you know, first name Kevin, you'll track me down pretty quickly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kevin. This is Gary Lipsky signing off. I'll be back next week with another informative episode on the Real Estate Investor Podcast. To all of our listeners, thanks for joining us. And if you like this episode, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher and like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it will help us reach more people. And if you'd like to learn more about what we do at Break of Day Capital, head over to our website at breakofdaycapital.com and sign up for our newsletter and fill out our investor application. We'll talk to you next week.